Um, I think one of the things it did on the negative side, it took away from what I had done the other years. Because when people first think of Joe Carter, they think of the home run, and that's it. And you said seven, I think it was 9 or 10. Oh, 700, yeah. So, I mean, the 10 years of 100 RBIs, those things, I think it diminished because they'll think about just the home run. And I like to think that I was more than just a guy that hit one home run in the World Series.
Joe Carter is almost 66 years old, and people are still lining up to honor him. In 2026, he was inducted into the National High School Hall of Fame, a major national honor that celebrates one of the most remarkable athletic careers a teenager has ever put together. That kind of recognition, coming this late in his life, tells you something important. Joe Carter never really left the spotlight. But here is the strange twist sitting right in the middle of his story. The same man who once hit one of the most famous home runs in the history of baseball is still standing outside the doors of the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Back in 2004, when Carter's name first appeared on the official ballot, voters were not kind. He received just 19 votes. That worked out to only 3.8% of the total. The rule at the time said a player needed at least 5% to stay on the ballot for future years. Carter fell short, and his name was quietly removed from consideration going forward. Think about how odd that sounds. A player with a championship swing that people still talk about decades later. A player with a long, productive career full of impressive numbers, and yet almost no support from the very voters who decide who gets remembered forever. How does that happen? It raises a real question. Was Joe Carter simply misunderstood by the numbers people who came after him? Or does his career genuinely fall short of the standard baseball has set for its biggest stars? That question is worth asking honestly, and we will look at it closely later in this story. But it should not be the only lens we use to look at Joe Carter's life. If stories about sports legends who deserve a second look and a fair hearing matter to you, use the hype feature right now and give this video some hype as we dig into who Joe Carter really was, both on the field and long after he left it. Because the truth is, reducing Joe Carter to a single Hall of Fame vote misses almost everything interesting about him. It misses the childhood in Oklahoma City, where he dominated 4 different sports at once. It misses the record-setting college career that made him a top draft pick. It misses more than a decade of elite power hitting across several different teams, and it misses everything he built after his playing days ended, from broadcasting booths to golf courses to a charity that has quietly raised millions of dollars for young people in need. Before we can understand any of that, though, we need to go back to the single moment that made Joe Carter a household name in the first place, the swing that turned an already accomplished ball player into a permanent piece of baseball history. To understand Joe Carter, you have to start with the night everyone remembers. It happened on October 23, 1993, during Game 6 of the World Series. The Toronto Blue Jays were hosting the Philadelphia Phillies at Sky Dome in Toronto, and the stakes could not have been higher. Toronto had already won the World Series the year before, in 1992, beating the Atlanta Braves to bring the championship north of the border for the first time in baseball history. Now, 1 year later, they had a chance to do something even rarer. They had a chance to win back-to-back titles. But that night was not going smoothly. Toronto trailed Philadelphia by a score of 6-5. It was the bottom of the 9th inning, the last chance for Toronto to score before the series would be forced to a decisive Game 7. Philadelphia brought in their closer, a hard-throwing left-hander named Mitch Williams, to try to lock the game down and keep the season alive. Toronto had runners on first and second base, which meant a home run would not just tie the game, it would win the whole series in an instant. Joe Carter stepped into the batter's box. The count worked its way to 2 balls and 2 strikes. Everyone in that stadium, and everyone watching on television, understood exactly what was on the line with the next pitch. Mitch Williams delivered, and Joe Carter swung. The contact was clean and powerful. The ball rose into the night sky and carried over the left field wall for a home run. Not a solo shot, not a 2-run blast to tie the game, a 3-run walk-off home run that ended the World Series on the spot. Toronto had done it. Back-to-back champions. To really understand how rare that moment was, you have to zoom out across the entire history of the sport. Major League Baseball has been playing postseason games for well over a century. In all of that time, across thousands of games and countless dramatic finishes, only 2 players have ever ended a World Series with a walk-off home run. One of them was Bill Mazeroski, who did it all the way back in Game 7 of the 1960 World Series. The other was Joe Carter. 2 names, across more than 100 years of history. That alone places Carter in one of the smallest and most exclusive clubs in all of professional sports. As Carter rounded the bases that night, he could not contain himself. He leaped into the air near first base, both fists pumping, pure joy written across his face. That single image, the leap, the fists, the roar of the Skydome crowd behind him, has been replayed countless times in the decades since. It has become one of the most recognizable moments in the history of sports broadcasting. For an entire country, it turned Joe Carter into more than just a great hitter. It made him a lasting national icon in Canada, tied forever to one of the proudest moments in Canadian sports history. The Toronto Blue Jays have never let that moment fade. As part of the celebrations marking the franchise's 50th season, the team commissioned a permanent bronze statue outside Rogers Centre, showing Carter frozen in the exact motion of that unforgettable swing. Fans who walk past it today are looking at the precise instant that changed Joe Carter's life forever, cast in metal so it can never be forgotten. It is easy to stop the story right there. For a lot of fans, that home run is the beginning and the end of what they know about Joe Carter. Ask a casual baseball fan about him, and there is a good chance the only thing they can tell you is that leap around first base, or the sound of the Skydome crowd exploding, or the sight of his teammates mobbing him at home plate. It is a moment so powerful that it has, in some ways, swallowed up the rest of his career in the public imagination. But stopping there would be a mistake, because that swing, as famous as it is, only tells one small part of a much bigger athletic life. It does not explain how Carter developed the bat speed and the timing to hit that pitch in the first place. It does not explain how he built the kind of career that put him in position to even be at the plate in that moment. Long before Joe Carter ever wore a Toronto uniform, before he ever set foot on a major league field, he was already one of the most gifted young athletes to ever come out of the state of Oklahoma, and that story deserves just as much attention as the swing everyone remembers. Joseph Chris Carter was born on March 7, 1960, in Oklahoma City. He was one of 11 children born to Joseph and Athaline Carter. Picture that for a moment. 11 kids under one roof, which means a house that was probably loud, busy, and full of energy from morning until night. In a family that size, playing sports outside was not some special activity. It was simply what everyone did to pass the time and burn off energy. It was normal, expected, and constant. But what young Joe Carter did with that ordinary, busy childhood turned out to be anything but ordinary. At Millwood High School, Carter did not settle for being good at one sport. He became one of the rare athletes who dominated 4 different sports at the exact same time, and he did it well enough to be remembered for it decades later. Start with baseball, since that is the sport that eventually made him famous. Carter was a 4-year starting pitcher and utility player, meaning coaches could put him almost anywhere on the field and trust him to perform. He played both the infield and the outfield. His hitting improved every single season he played. As a sophomore, he batted .412. As a junior, he pushed that number up to .475. Then, in his senior year, he hit an almost unbelievable .633, while also hitting 10 home runs and driving in 31 runs. A senior season like that does not happen by accident. It earned him first-team All-State honors in baseball. But baseball was only a quarter of what Carter was doing at Millwood. In basketball, he helped lead his team to 3 straight state championship finals. 3 years in a row, Millwood found itself playing for a title, and Carter was a central reason why. The team won Oklahoma State championships in 1976, and again during Carter's senior season. In that final year, his performance was strong enough to earn him the Class 2A State Tournament Most Valuable Player Award. Then there was football, a completely different sport requiring a completely different set of skills, and Carter excelled at that too. He started at quarterback for 3 straight years, which meant he was the one running the offense and making decisions on nearly every play. On top of that, he also played defensive back and handled the punting duties, meaning he was on the field constantly in nearly every phase of the game. As a sophomore, he helped lead the Millwood Falcons all the way to a Class 2A state runner-up finish, an impressive result for a player still so young. And then there is the track and field story, which might be the single most surprising piece of Carter's high school career. Carter was not even planning to compete in track that season at all, because baseball already kept him fully occupied every spring. He only ended up at a regional track meet to support a classmate who was competing that day. While he was there, almost as an afterthought, he decided to enter the long jump, with essentially no training and no preparation. He won the regional title anyway. That result was impressive enough on its own, but Carter kept going. He went on to win the Class 2A state championship in the long jump, clearing a distance of 23 feet. A student who was not even planning to compete became a state champion in a sport he barely practiced. 4 different sports. 4 seasons where he ranked among the very best in the entire state. That kind of versatility does not just happen. It reflects a rare level of natural athletic ability, the kind of raw talent that existed in Joe Carter long before any major league scout ever wrote his name down on a clipboard. It also helps explain something important about the player he eventually became: the balance, the foot speed, the hand-eye coordination, and the competitive instincts he built across basketball, football, and track, all fed directly into the baseball skills that would carry him to the top level of the sport. Most high school athletes have to pick a single sport eventually, simply because there is not enough time in the day for anything else. Carter managed to squeeze 4 sports into 4 years and excel at every single one of them. That is the version of Joe Carter that existed before any fame, before any championship, before any Hall of Fame debate. He was simply the most talented kid on nearly every field, court, and track he ever competed on, and Oklahoma City noticed long before the rest of the country did. Coaches across different sports at the same school were all competing for the same kid's time, and somehow Carter found a way to give each one of them a championship-caliber effort. After high school, Carter enrolled at Wichita State University. His original plan was ambitious. He wanted to play both football and baseball at the college level, continuing the same multi-sport approach that had defined his time at Millwood, but college sports demand a level of specialization that high school does not always require, and Carter eventually had to make a choice. Under head baseball coach Gene Stevenson, he decided to put all of his focus into baseball alone. That decision paid off almost immediately. Once Carter stopped splitting his attention between 2 sports, his raw arm strength and his outfield speed started turning into serious, consistent power at the plate. Between 1979 and 1981, he set 10 single-season records and 11 career records for the Wichita State baseball program. Those are not small numbers. Setting that many records at a single university, across just a few seasons, shows just how dominant he had become at the college level. His junior year, in 1981, was simply massive by any standard. He batted .411 that season, a number that would be remarkable at any level of baseball. He hit 24 home runs. He drove in 120 runs, a total that set an NCO record at the time. For a season that complete, that dominant, Carter was named the Sporting News College Player of the Year, one of the highest individual honors available in college baseball. By the time that season ended, professional scouts across the country were paying very close attention to the young outfielder from Wichita State. The Chicago Cubs made their move that same year. In the 1981 MLB draft, they selected Joe Carter, 2nd overall in the first round. Being picked that high is itself a signal of enormous confidence in a player's future. Carter did not take long to prove that confidence was justified. He moved through the Cubs' minor league system quickly, showing the same kind of production that had made him a college star. Then, in June of 1984, everything changed again. The Cubs made a trade that would end up shaping the rest of Carter's career. Chicago sent Carter, along with outfielder Mel Hall and 2 minor league players, to the Cleveland Indians. In exchange, the Cubs received starting pitcher Rick Sutcliffe, along with George Frazier and Ron Hasse. At the time, that trade was about Chicago strengthening its pitching staff. Looking back, it also happened to be the moment that gave Joe Carter his first real opportunity to become an everyday major league power hitter. In Cleveland, Carter developed quickly into one of the most dangerous hitters in the entire American League. The 1986 season stands out as a breakout year. That season, Carter led all of Major League Baseball with 121 RBIs. On top of that RBI total, he also recorded 200 hits, hit 29 home runs, and scored 108 runs. Leading the entire sport in RBIs during a single season is a rare accomplishment, and it announced to the baseball world that Joe Carter had arrived as a legitimate star. He kept building on that success the following year. In 1987, Carter combined 32 home runs with 31 stolen bases in the same season. That combination earned him membership in the exclusive 30-30 Club, a group reserved for players who reach at least 30 home runs and 30 stolen bases in a single year. Very few players in baseball history have that kind of combination of power and speed, and Carter had it while he was still, in many ways, just establishing himself. By this point in his career, long before he ever put on a Toronto uniform or stepped up to face Mitch Williams in the 1993 World Series, Joe Carter was already one of the most productive and complete hitters in all of professional baseball. The fame that would come later in Toronto was built directly on top of the foundation he laid during these early years in Cleveland, where he first proved he belonged among the game's elite power hitters. It is worth pausing on that timeline for a moment. Carter had already led the entire sport in RBIs. He had already joined the rare 30-30 Club He had already shown he could hit for both power and average at the highest level of competition. All of that happened years before the World Series walk-off that most fans think of first when they hear his name. The swing made him unforgettable, but the years in Cleveland are what made him a genuine star in the first place, and they set the stage for everything that came next. Carter's path eventually led him to San Diego, where he played the 1990 season for the Padres. It turned out to be just a single-season stop, but it set up one of the most important trades of his entire career. In December of 1990, Toronto made a bold move. The Blue Jays acquired both Joe Carter and star second baseman Roberto Alomar in one blockbuster transaction. In exchange, San Diego received Fred McGriff and Tony Fernandez. At the time, it was a massive trade involving 4 accomplished players changing teams at once. Looking back with the benefit of history, baseball people have widely viewed that deal as the spark that helped set up Toronto's back-to-back World Series championships. In Toronto, Carter became a central piece of a genuine powerhouse roster. Rather than repeat the details of his walk-off home run again, since that story has already been told in full, it is worth stepping back and looking at just how much he accomplished across those Toronto years as a whole. Over his time in Toronto, Carter earned 5 All-Star selections during his career, appearing in 1991, 1992, 1993, 1994, and 1996. Making an All-Star team even once is a real accomplishment. Making it 5 separate times shows a level of sustained excellence across multiple seasons, not just a single hot year. He also won 2 Silver Slugger awards as an American League outfielder, taking home that honor in both 1991 and 1992. The Silver Slugger recognizes the best offensive player at each position across an entire league, which means Carter was formally recognized as one of the very best hitting outfielders in all of the American League during those seasons. And of course, Toronto won the World Series in both 1992 and 1993, with Carter playing a central offensive role both times, not just in the famous moment everyone remembers, but across each full championship run. Zooming out across his entire career gives an even clearer picture of just how much Carter did on a baseball field over the years. He played 16 seasons in the major leagues, from 1983 all the way through 1998. Across that time, he suited up for 6 different franchises: the Chicago Cubs, the Cleveland Indians, the San Diego Padres, the Toronto Blue Jays, the Baltimore Orioles, and the San Francisco Giants. Over that span, he appeared in 2,189 games, coming to the plate 9,091 times, across 8,422 official at-bats. His career hit totals are just as impressive as his power numbers. He collected 2,184 hits over his career, which added up to 3,911 total bases, once you count every single, double, triple, and home run. That total included 432 doubles and 53 triples. He hit 396 home runs across his career, a number that places him among the more prolific power hitters of his generation, and he drove in 1,445 runs. On top of all that power, he also stole 231 bases during his career, a number that shows he was never just a slow, lumbering slugger. He had real speed to go along with his strength. What really stands out, though, is how consistent Carter was, year after year, across nearly 2 decades of professional baseball. He had 6 separate seasons with at least 30 home runs. He had 12 straight seasons with at least 20 home runs, an incredible run of sustained power that lasted more than a decade without interruption. He had 10 separate seasons with 100 or more RBIs. He also had 6 seasons with 20 or more stolen bases, showing that speed stayed part of his game well into his career. From 1986 through 1997, Carter averaged more than 155 games played every single season. In a sport where injuries can derail even the most talented players, that kind of durability is not something to take for granted. It meant that year after year, Carter's teams could simply pencil him into the lineup and expect him to be there, day after day, producing at a high level. That durability is a major reason he was able to pile up the kind of career totals that very few players in baseball history can match. Power hitters who stay this healthy for this long, across 6 different teams and 16 full seasons, are rare, and that steady presence in the lineup is part of what made Joe Carter such a valuable player for so many different organizations over so many years. Add it all together, and you get a player who moved from franchise to franchise and kept producing at nearly the same high level everywhere he went. He was not a hitter who needed the perfect ballpark or the perfect lineup around him to succeed. He simply showed up, took his position in the outfield, and delivered runs and power year after year, whether he was playing for a rebuilding Cleveland team, a competitive San Diego club, or a championship-contending Toronto squad. That kind of consistency across so many different situations is part of what made his overall career total so large by the time he finally retired. Few players in baseball history can say they were the offensive centerpiece for teams in 3 different cities within a stretch of only a few seasons, all while continuing to put up nearly identical numbers no matter where they landed. That is a version of greatness that does not always show up cleanly in a single statistic, but it is real, and it was part of what made Joe Carter such a trusted, valuable name on any roster he joined throughout the 1980s and 1990s. So, with all of that production, all of those seasons, all of those honors, why is Joe Carter still standing outside the doors of the Baseball Hall of Fame? This is where his story gets genuinely complicated, and it deserves an honest, balanced look at both sides of the argument. Start with the traditional case in his favor, because it is a genuinely strong one. Across the 15-year stretch from 1984 through 1998, Carter drove in more runs than any other player in Major League Baseball. His total for that period was 1,444 RBIs. For comparison, Cal Ripken Jr. had 1,319 RBIs over that same span. Moving to a brand new team every single year, adjusting to a new lineup, a new ballpark, and new teammates, and still hitting that same high mark each time, says a great deal about his consistency as a hitter. Now here is the other side of the story, the side that modern statistics bring sharply into focus. Carter's full career batting line was .259, with a .306 on-base percentage and a .464 slugging percentage. Put together, that works out to a career OPS of .771 and an OPS plus of 105. In simple terms, OPS plus is a way of comparing a hitter's overall offense to the league average for his era, after adjusting for ballparks and conditions, so players from different decades can be compared fairly. An OPS plus of 105 means Carter was only about 5% better than a league average hitter across the full length of his career. That is a solid, respectable number, but it is not the kind of number that most Hall of Fame hitters tend to post over a full career. Part of the reason comes down to how often he walked, or rather, how rarely he did. Carter drew a walk in only 5.4% of his plate appearances across his career. He never walked more than 49 times in any single season. He was an aggressive, free-swinging hitter who preferred to put the ball in play rather than wait for a perfect pitch, and that approach kept his on-base percentage well below where a truly elite hitter's number would typically sit. On top of that, his defense in the outfield corners was rated poorly by modern defensive metrics, which chipped away even further at his overall value as a player. When everything gets added together, Carter finished his career with 19.5 Baseball Reference wins above replacement, often shortened to BWAR. That total sits far below what is typically expected from a Hall of Fame corner outfielder. There is also a deeper question hiding underneath those big RBI totals. Research from sabermetric analysts, including work from the well-known analyst Bill James, has argued that Carter's high RBI numbers were driven in large part by opportunity. All of this weighed heavily on Hall of Fame voters when the time came to judge his case. When Carter appeared on the BWA ballot for the first time in 2004, he received only 19 votes, which came out to 3.8% of the total. Because that fell below the 5% threshold required to remain eligible, his name was removed from future BWA ballots entirely. Years later, in 2018, a Today's Game era committee made up of 16 members took another careful look at his case, considering it outside the normal writer's vote. He received fewer than 5 votes from that panel as well. None of that erases what Carter actually did on the field over 16 seasons. It simply shows how much the way baseball measures greatness has changed since he played, shifting away from counting stats like RBIs and toward rate-based measurements like OPS plus and WAR. Fans who grew up watching Carter play remember a feared power hitter who came through in the biggest moments. Fans who came to baseball later, armed with newer statistical tools, tend to see a good but not truly elite hitter who benefited from favorable circumstances. Both views are looking at the same career, just through very different lenses. The good news for Joe Carter is that his life story does not end with a Hall of Fame ballot, and neither should the way we remember him. Carter played his final Major League season in 1998 with the San Francisco Giants, closing out 16 years at the highest level of the sport. But retiring from playing did not mean stepping away from the game he had spent his whole life loving. Carter simply found new ways to stay involved in baseball, and each one of them tells you something more about who he was off the field. In 1999, Carter moved into broadcasting. He became a primary television analyst for Toronto Blue Jays games on CTV Sportsnet, bringing his years of playing experience directly into the broadcast booth. He stayed in that role through the 2000 season, helping fans in Toronto see the game through the eyes of someone who had actually lived through its biggest moments. In 2001, he shifted to a new city and a new broadcast booth, joining the Chicago Cubs, the very team that had originally drafted him back in 1981. He worked alongside veteran play-by-play announcer Chip Correa, serving as the lead color commentator on WGN-TV all the way through 2002. For those years, Carter brought a player's perspective straight into fans' living rooms, explaining the game in a way that only a former star could. Years later, in January of 2015, Carter returned to professional baseball once again, this time in a front office role rather than a broadcasting one. He joined the Arizona Diamondbacks as a special assistant to general manager Dave Stewart. In that job, Carter took on real, meaningful responsibility within the organization. He helped evaluate talent across the Diamondbacks system, offering an experienced eye on young players moving up through the ranks. He advised the team on how the clubhouse was run, drawing on his own decades of experience as a teammate and a leader. He also mentored young outfielders who were still learning the position he once mastered at the highest level. Rather than chase a full-time managing job or a head coaching position, Carter chose to focus his energy on advisory work and on the charitable efforts that mattered most to him personally. There is one more part of Carter's post-playing legacy that many casual fans do not know about, and it involves something as simple as the bat in his hands. Back in 1997, while he was still an active player, Carter became the first professional baseball player to use a maple wood bat, developed by Sam Holman, the founder of a company called Sam Bat. This was a genuine first for the entire sport. Nobody at the professional level had trusted a maple bat in a real major league game before Carter picked one up. In his very first regular season at-bat using that new maple bat, Carter delivered immediately, hitting a grand slam. To be completely clear about credit, Carter did not invent the maple bat himself. That credit belongs entirely to Sam Holman, the man who designed and built it. But by choosing to use it and by delivering right away with a grand slam in his first swing with it, Carter helped show the entire sport exactly what maple could do at the highest level of competition. That single at bat helped trigger a much larger shift across professional baseball, moving hitters away from the traditional northern white ash bats that had been the standard for generations. Today, maple bats make up the large majority of what major league hitters actually swing during games, and it all traces back, in part, to Joe Carter's willingness to be the first player to try something new. It is a small detail in the grand scope of a 16-year career, but it says something about Carter's role in the sport. He was not just a player who racked up big numbers and moved on. He was someone who shaped small pieces of how the game itself is played, whether that meant mentoring a young outfielder in Arizona, explaining the finer points of the game to television audiences in Toronto and Chicago, or simply being brave enough to swing a brand new kind of bat when nobody else in the sport was willing to try it first. Carter's biggest impact after baseball, though, may be the one that has nothing to do with statistics at all. In 2010, he started the Joe Carter Classic, an annual celebrity golf tournament held at Eagle's Nest Golf Club in Maple, Ontario. The event brings together well-known athletes, entertainers, and corporate sponsors, all gathering for one shared purpose. It raises money for the Children's Aid Foundation of Canada and related programs that support young people who need it most. Over the years, the Joe Carter Classic has raised an estimated $8 million. That is not a small number, and it is not a one-time gift either. It represents a sustained, year-after-year commitment that has now stretched across more than a decade. That money has gone toward post-secondary education scholarships, helping young people afford school. It has funded social relief programs. It has supported mental health resources for people who need them. A large part of that support goes specifically toward vulnerable and at-risk young people who are transitioning out of the child welfare system, one of the most difficult and overlooked periods in a young person's life. For someone who could have simply stepped away from the public eye after his playing career ended, Carter instead chose to build something lasting for kids he would likely never meet, quietly turning a golf tournament into one of the more meaningful charitable efforts run by any former major league player. So where is Joe Carter today, at almost 66 years old? He lives in the Kansas City metropolitan area, and he is still living an active, athletic life. He plays golf at a 1 handicap, which is an extremely strong level for an amateur golfer, the kind of skill that takes real dedication to maintain. He regularly travels to Toronto and across the United States for corporate speaking events, youth clinics, and Blue Jays alumni gatherings, staying closely connected to the fans and the franchise that made him a legend all those years ago. His message to young athletes is simple and direct. Playing one sport all year round can lead to burnout and to overuse injuries, and young athletes are often far better off building a broader athletic foundation first, the same way he did as a kid in Oklahoma City. Yes, One swing made Joe Carter famous forever, but that swing was never the whole story. Behind it stands a four-sport prodigy from Oklahoma City, a record-setting college star, a durable and relentless major league hitter, a two-time World Series champion, a broadcaster, a front office mentor, a batting innovation pioneer, and a man who has helped raise millions of dollars for young people who needed a hand. So where is Joe Carter really now? He is not standing in the batter's box with a championship on the line anymore, but through baseball events, golf, charity work, speaking engagements, and now a brand new Hall of Fame honor, he remains exactly what he always was. A man who never stopped showing up, on any field, in any city, for any cause that needed him, and a man who never once stopped giving back to the game and the people who made his remarkable life possible, right up to the very day the National High School Hall of Fame finally called his name once again.